just before we do that, Hassaan, I want to let you jump in here because you seem to know ahead of time, and I want to know how, that this was going to be Sabine's defense. What's up, you scholars of enlightenment? Dr. Sam Gregson, particle physicist here again. I hope you've had a brilliant week and have an exciting weekend in store. Now, last week, Sabine Hossenfelder finally got round to running interference for her friend and fellow contrarian Eric Weinstein after his disastrous showing alongside theoretical physicist Sean Carroll on the Pier Morgan Uncensored show. Sabine does not seem to be able to appropriately criticise Eric, his performance on the show, or geometric unity, Eric's fatally flawed would-be theory of everything, in isolation. As such, she decided to defend Eric with whataboutism, claiming that while Eric's ideas may be flawed, they are no more misguided or broken than leading theoretical frameworks, such as string theory. And, in fact, Eric's ideas may be preferable as they have not used any taxpayer funding.
But the truth is that Eric's idea isn't any better or worse than all the other crap they're working on. The only difference is that he hasn't wasted as much of your tax money on it.
Sabine went on to claim that physicists are simply scared of Eric Weinstein because he's exposing the rot at the heart of the field.
In any case, I think what's really happening here is that a lot of people who work in the foundations of physics are very afraid that Eric is exposing how rotten their entire field is.
I guess the only surprise about Sabine's take is that it took her nearly a month to come to the same lazy conclusion she always reaches. Scientists are delusional idiots, her contrarian friend should be treated with kid gloves, and everything she doesn't support is a corrupt cash grab overseen by sticky-fingered physicists. She's getting slow. Today, I have gathered 3 theoretical physicists well-versed in string theory and geometric unity to help delineate why Sabine's contentions hold so little weight. Firstly, I'm joined by Hassaan Saleem, or Super Conformal Hassaan, as he's known online. Hassaan is a PhD student in theoretical physics at the University of Albany. His work focuses on problems in string theory and conformal field theory. He is also the host of the Phi Maths podcast, a podcast dedicated to physics, mathematics, education and related issues, and creates video lectures on graduate-level theoretical physics topics. Secondly, we welcome Professor Nirmalya Kajuri. Professor Kajuri is a theoretical physicist at the Indian Institute of Technology in Mandi, India. His research focuses on the interplay between quantum theory and gravity and the fields of ADS-CFT correspondence and quantum cosmology. Professor Kajuri is also a science writer and YouTuber and regularly produces fantastic threads illuminating fundamental physics on Twitter. Last, but by no means least, I'm joined by Dr. Christian Ferko. Dr. Ferko is a postdoctoral researcher at Northeastern University and the Institute for Artificial Intelligence and Fundamental Interactions, or IFI. He's excited about various aspects of quantum field theory, string theory, and gravity, and recently has also been investigating connections between theoretical physics and AI. He has also performed a deep dive of geometric unity on the Professor Dave channel and carefully delineated its many flaws. So who better to help me dive into the troubled waters of internet recriminations? Okay, guys, thank you for joining me. So let's start right at the very start. Hassaan, has Edward Witten signed off on you being here today?
No, I'm from his academic lineage. I think so is Christian, but yeah, he's not paid us. I mean, graduate students are not paid enough anyway. So no.
Nirmalya, has Natty Cyberg rubber stamped everything you're going to say today?
I'm getting something. Can I say no?
not quite yet, unfortunately. No, so we're waiting on him. And Christian, is Juan Maldacena aware of your Zoom schedule this fine Friday morning?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I had to sacrifice a goat to the 3 of them in order to get their permission. But no, I'm joking, of course.
Good. I'm glad we are now in the clear with the Church of String Theory to proceed. So excellent. So I want to start with this idea of whether physics has progressed in the last several decades. So in her recent video, Sabine Hossenfelder falls back on this kind of canard that there's been no progress in the foundations of physics for the last several decades. Now, is this accurate? Why are people saying it? And kind of what metrics do you believe they're using? Nirmalya, maybe I've put you bottom, not on purpose, but maybe I come to you first to speak. what's going on here? Do you agree with that sentiment? And why are people saying this?
I disagree, Sam. There has been gradual and steady progress in the foundations of physics in the last, whatever many decades. Now, what happens is that from 1900 to 1970, there was spectacular progress, especially in terms of the tangible deliverables. And a lot of people maybe expect that progress is linear.
Yeah, people like a linear trend line, don't they? Don't like yeah.
So from 1900, we went from not knowing if atoms were real. People were debating, are atoms real? And to go to a place where we have solved 3 of the 4 fundamental interactions and observed so many particles. And so there is an expectation that progress will be at the same rate. But the problem with that is that we have actually solved all the easy problems. And the problems that are left are the very hard ones, like quantum gravity, which operates at Planck scale, which is 10 to the power 19 GeV, which is the extreme energies that we get at LHC are 10 to the power 16 times smaller than the Planck scale.
You're trying to solve these problems, which are basically, for want of a better phrase, kind of solving all of physics. And you're really reaching for the kind of top of the tree when we're really down at a lower energy regime at the moment.
Yeah. It's like a video game where you've cleared all the easy levels, but now it's a lot harder.
Now we're on to the boss.
Yeah, and even for quantum field theory, see, we got a lot of purchase out of spamming one trick, like one tool, which is perturbation theory. Yeah. And that works when you have like interaction that is weak. There's a number which gives you the strength of the interaction, which is the coupling constant, and you can expand everything in powers of the coupling constant. And with this one trick, we got a lot of purchase. But when we go to when that number is not small, you cannot play this trick, and then it becomes very difficult. And that's the problem of strongly coupled fields. And even for general field theory, there's a lot of geometric structure within field theory that we did not see before, that we were not aware of. We were doing this trick and we were getting the results, but now we are finding out that there's a lot of unity, a lot of geometry, a lot of geometric unity, to coin a phrase.
Careful.
Theory. So progress is hard because the problems are much harder. Progress is relatively slower, but there has been a lot of progress in terms of pushing back on our ignorance on all these topics.
I know Daniel Green, I just wanted to flag this up, has a beautiful thread of all these kind of amazing papers that have brought progress in the field. Is the problem here, Hassaan, maybe that, like kind of Nirmalya kind of alluded to, that there's not a new particle there, there's not a new force there, and there's these kind of arbitrary lines that people don't like, a little bit of progress in the mathematics, which is maybe a little bit niche, maybe which they don't come into contact with every day. Are people kind of setting these arbitrary lines and then saying, well, you haven't reached this standard that we reached in the 60s, 70s, so where's the progress? Is that kind of half of the problem, do you think?
I think the problem is that you will have as many criteria for progress. So what I'm trying to say is that the more people you have, the more criteria of success you have. For example, majorly we're talking about like Sabine here. I think Sabine hates new particles. So if there are new particles, she will say that this is not progress. This is like nonsense.
She will be the equivalent of Rabbi. She will be, who ordered this? Like, what's going on?
Exactly.
Craziness has ensued.
Right. So if that was the criterion, and suppose that, there were proposals for new particles, for her, it would not be, progress, right? So the problem is that, you don't have a set criteria for what progress is. Progress is a very subjective word. Different people may mean different things with, when they use the word progress. So I don't think that this is the problem. As far as forces are concerned, so we do know that, there can't be like a long range force, which is unless it's very, very weak. So that's not going to happen, because if there is an additional long range force, which is not extremely weak, it will break Einstein's equivalence principle and things like that. So there may be a very short range force that we haven't discovered. But the thing is that if there was a new force, would all of the people, agree that this is progress? I don't know. Because if there was a proposal for a fifth force, people have put forward, proposals for the fifth force. Some people, again, like Sabine, they will say that this is not progress. So I mean, there is not a set criteria for what do you mean by progress here.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to define. Christian, any thoughts before we move on from this idea?
No, I completely agree with what's been said, but just to echo a little bit, I think both of what Hassaan and Nirmalya have said is correct in that I think Sabine is really applying something like a 20th century set of criteria for progress in physics in the 21st century. Things were great. We learned a lot of things very quickly, and now the low-hanging fruit have been picked. And part of the criticism, I think, which addresses kind of string theory, which we'll come to, is that in the early days of string theory, I think people sort of expected the same trajectory of progress in string theory that we had been seeing in quantum field theory. And maybe in the 80s and 90s, people were very optimistic and thought, wow, there's so many consistency conditions that fix so many aspects of string theory that within a few years, we'll be able to identify the unique string compactification, which we'll discuss later, that will get the standard model, will compute the mass of the electron from first principles, and all of this stuff. So that sort of
is it sort of not meeting those expectations, which then feels like failure going forwards, or is it kind of maybe slight overhype? Or I remember, this huge paper that sort of came out and sort of kicked everything off with string theory, and then not quite going as fast as we want. Does that then feel like failure, or is people can kind of cast it as failure?
I think that's exactly right. I think it's being construed as failure when in reality it was optimism, which maybe was misplaced, but the progress that has been made, I think, is actually quite remarkable. I mean, the amount of mileage you get out of consistency conditions, which we'll discuss later, I think is very impressive. We've learned a lot about strongly coupled field theory, which is the regime, which is the opposite of the trick that Nirmalya discussed, perturbation theory, which we knew very little about decades ago or half a century ago, and we've learned a lot more about now. So from my perspective, it's really been a parade of successes and triumphs, which are more conceptual, more mathematical, perhaps. So we've made a lot of progress in the past few decades. But if you apply these other criteria that Sabine and others like, which is sort of maybe old-fashioned, then you can spin a sort of narrative where no progress has been made, even though I think that's not representative.
Fair enough. So different representations, potentially not meeting some of the optimism, lots of reasons why people can come to this idea, but it's not necessarily accurate. So let's move into some of the successes then. So the idea is there has been no progress. So let's talk about some of the progress that has been made. So can you give us a few examples of how frameworks like string theory and others have driven forward fundamental physics over the last few decades? So maybe Nirmalya, if I come back to you, maybe if we start with this idea of anomaly cancellation that we've got up on the screen first. So this was the kind of thing that kicked off scientists being very excited about string theory. What are we talking about here, and why is this such a big deal that helps people be optimistic about string theory, but doesn't maybe something like geometric unity or another framework we might come on to?
I think Hassaan should take this one. I think this is more in his wheelhouse.
Right, good.
Okay, sure. So let me try, and then Christian can also add to what I say. So I think one of the things that I wish more people talked about in pop science is the swampland program. I think a lot of people don't talk about swampland program for some reason. I don't know why. So what is swampland program? Swampland program is a program that tries to answer the question that what effective field theories are. Effective field theories are theories that you use to describe phenomenon at low energies, up to a certain energy scale. So the swampland program tries to answer the question that what effective field theories are compatible with gravity as you go to high energies, right? And the thing is that there are some conjectures, a lot of conjectures actually, that people have come up with that try to tell you that what quantum gravity should look like at low energies. And most of it is string theory driven, right? For example, one of the conjectures is called the weak gravity conjecture, which says that if you have electromagnetism in your theory, gravity has to be the weakest force. There is no other theory that tells you that gravity has to be the weakest force. I mean, it may be the case that, for example, if you write down standard model and general relativity at low energies, gravity turns out to be the weakest force, but it never tells you, no other theory tells you that it has to be the weakest force. But I think that's like a big thing. Then there are some other, successes that have never been achieved before, but they may not look very, very, big successes, but they can turn out to be some big successes. For example, if I'm not wrong, I think there is this bound that electron mass or electron charge has to be greater than a certain bound That has never been done before. Although that bound is kind of meaningless. It's like 10 to the power negative 22, something like that. But there has never been a bound before. So these kind of things can be, predicted using string theory, and probably these bounds can become tighter. Another thing, as Christian was alluding to before, that we may find a certain string compactification that will give you standard model and things like that we look for. So what is a string compactification? You have extra dimensions in string theory. You make some of them smaller to get a 4-dimensional space-time that we live in. Now, why is that a hard problem? There are actually many reasons why that is a hard problem. One problem is that we are not able to get something like de Sitter. The de Sitter is, a space-time that has positive cosmological constant, because it seems to be the case that our universe has small but positive cosmological constant. It's very hard to achieve in string theory. So there are like a lot of acrobatics that you have to do in order to get, a positive cosmological constant. There are proposals for one of them is called KKLT, but it's hard to put in practice. There are 2 steps of KKLT. One step was kind of there was this paper by Manki Kim and Liam McAllister in 2021, 2 papers actually, which sort of gives you the proof of the proof of the concept for the first step. The second step is hard to perform, but there is progress. You see, KKLT was proposed in 2003. And these papers came in 2021 because it's hard. It's very, very hard to perform these steps actually. Apart from that, there is an example that until 1 year ago, I rarely saw in popular science, except for Joseph Conlon's book, Why String Theory. But now I am seeing that example at some places, and I'm happy about it. And that example is about using holographic methods that primarily come from string theory to, predict the viscosity of quark gluon plasma. That was done in mid-2000s. That's something that people don't talk about a lot. I mean, I think that's okay. Some people, so when I mention that example, some people say that, yeah, but that's not string theory, that's holography, that's like more general. Sure, but it primarily comes from string theory. I mean, come on. The thing is that even if it's not a proof of string theory, I agree, it at least increases your credence in string theory. Right? That, okay, string theory may be the correct theory, even if it is not the proof, of course.
I think this is something that we're going to come on to, that there's all of this progress that is related, that gives people confidence that we should keep going with this thing, right? But even if you haven't completely solved the problem of quantum gravity, there are these signposts that mean that this is the most promising way forward, and this is why scientists are still interested in it, and that's why
I agree.
Goes into it, where people go.
Yes, I mean, as far as fundamental physics is concerned, progress in fundamental physics that comes from string theory, I think these are probably the biggest examples that come from the top of my head. Yeah. If you want to go into progress into in fundamental physics, in general, not necessarily coming from string theory. There are other examples, but we can discuss them later. If you want to talk about what string theory has done in mathematics, I mean, it's going to be a long podcast.
We're going to jump into a couple of them. So maybe, Christian, if I come to you, why was this anomaly cancellation stuff specifically? Why is this such a big deal that separates out string theory as a promising framework from, geometric unity or whatever it might be? Why is this such a big deal that people like Sean Carroll are talking about on Pier Morgan as, a really important stamp that goes in favor of string theory?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we talk about anomalies in physics, there's different types of anomalies. We have things called 't Hooft anomalies and chiral anomalies. But when we talk about anomaly cancellation here, what we specifically mean are gauge anomalies. So what we mean is that we have certain types of theories in physics called gauge theories that have an identification between certain field configurations. So we take different possible field configurations and say, these must be physically equivalent. That's part of the definition of these theories. And what an anomaly is the statement that if you try to impose consistency between your gauge theory and quantum mechanics, then this equivalence between different field configurations which you had before breaks down. So different field configurations that should have been equivalent are no longer equivalent in the quantum theory. And that's extremely bad. So that's fatal. For a lay audience, all you need to take away from this explanation is that if you have one of these gauge anomalies in your theory, it's completely fatal. It's dead. Throw it away. That's it. Yes. So it's a consistency condition similar to some of these swampland conjectures, which Hassaan was just describing, that in any reasonable theory, you must have anomaly cancellation. That's a 0th order check that you have to have in order for the theory to be viable. And indeed, as you're pointing out, when anomaly cancellation was shown for string theory, I think in 1984, this is what launched a lot of the excitement, because if you have not demonstrated an anomaly cancellation, then what are we even talking about? There's no reason to be discussing the theory whatsoever. So that was a big, big impetus, and a lot of excitement came from this demonstration by Green and Schwartz of the anomaly cancellation for the string.
And Nirmalya, I think something that was frustrating about Sabine's recent video, talking about geometric unity, for example, she kind of just said, I'm sure this mathematics could be made to work out if some people looked at it for, some PhD students looked at it for a while, like they have with string theory. But this is not something that just kind of is easily done, right? This anomaly cancellation. It's a very big...
As Christian just explained, I mean, if your theory is anomaly, it is as good as dead. So it's over for geometric unity. Although, I mean, geometric unity, as Christian will explain, has even bigger problems than an anomaly. But so it's not something that will just work out. Yeah. It's very crucial that it actually works out before you can take the next step.
Excellent. All right. And another big thing.
Can I add
please,
something
Christian.
here?
Yeah, please jump in.
No, me.
Oh, so, sorry, Hassaan.
It's okay. So two things. First of all, when I gave you the explanation of KKLT, it may give the picture that there is a consensus on that. It's not true. I mean, there is a standoff between Harvard and Stanford on KKLT. So Harvard physicists, Wafa's group thinks that, it's not going to happen. Stanford people think that it's going to happen. So it's not a consensus. But the thing is that there are some calculations, and a calculation is a calculation, right? Nobody can refute that. The second thing is that is about what you just said, that, Sabine said that, so Eric is like a single person. If he had an army of postdocs, they could I think she used the word papered away. Yeah. He could have papered away this thing. I mean, do you know how string theory started? I mean, there was a time when John Schwartz was the only person in the world who was painstakingly working on string theory calculations in Caltech, and he used to be mocked. I mean, Feynman used to mock him by saying that, okay, how many dimensions does the world has today? And things like that. Right. But the thing is that if you have a correct explanation of, I think, this is something that I really believe in, that if you have the correct theory, eventually it will be vindicated.
It will survive. Then,
so yes, exactly. Because the thing is that when John Schwartz had this, thing, and, he collaborated with Michael Green, and they did this calculation in Colorado, I think. After that, people saw that, okay, this is something to work on. I mean, it's worth working on. So if it turns out that Eric's, work in the future, if it turns out that, okay, people understand that, okay, this work is worthy to be worked to work on, nobody in the world would be able to refute that this is not the case. So it's not that string theory, had support from the very start. I mean, the early string theorists did not have the best experience.
And this is the idea that is sort of projected by Sabine and others, is sort of like this is being led by, particularly, and Eric says this a lot, being, pushed forward by Ed Witten and other people just kind of swallow it and they don't really take account. This was a very small, mocked, uninteresting little field. But when they started to make this progress and jump through these hoops, have this anomaly cancellation, suddenly people sat up and went, interesting. That's now promising. That's something that Eric, for example, hasn't done. And that's why his work isn't taken as seriously at this juncture.
One more thing. So,
please.
I mean, this is something that I just hate. People make it as if Ed Witten came up with string theory. He didn't. Here's the thing. So there is this, story in popular science that there are 5 string theories, which is, come true. I mean, superstring theories, there are 5. Witten didn't come up with any one of them. I mean, even one of them was not invented by Witten. I mean, so the thing is that type 1, type 2A, type 2B, they were invented in the 70s and early 80s. Heterotic string theory, both of them, they were invented in the mid 80s. And they were invented by Gross, Martinez. Witten was not involved in coming up with any of those string theories. Yeah, he did show that they may be the limiter, they may be part of the single framework, but it's not that Witten equals string theory. That's like a very bad narrative that people have, propelled in the popular science.
That's very much pushed by Eric, that idea. Nirmalya, if we move on from this anomaly cancellation, one other thing that has really kind of led theoretical physicists to be interested in string theory is this idea of the ADS-CFT correspondence. Why is this important, and why has this been encouraging for physicists to continue to pursue string theory?
So this ADS-CFT correspondence came from string theory. It was first shown by Johan Muldersen in 1997. And what we have here is an example that I like to give to explain ADS-CFT is like a can of juice. Suppose you have a can of juice, and on the top on the top of the can, you can read off the ingredients inside. So from the outside, you know what is inside. And that is kind of the idea of ADS-CFT correspondence, where you have a space-time called anti-de Sitter or ADS, and whatever is going on inside that space-time, which has gravity, you can read off from its surface, which is its boundary, and where there's a different theory, which is a field theory which doesn't have gravity, which lives in one dimension less, called conformal field theory. And these two theories, which look completely different, are secretly equivalent. That's the duality. You can answer questions about one from the other. And this gives us a lot of power because, for one thing, if we have a strongly coupled gauge theory, which is on the CFT side, on the boundary, we don't know how to do those strongly coupled calculations, but we can use gravity, which in the duality becomes weakly coupled, meaning we can use the same trick of perturbation theory. We can do those calculations and we can get answers for the strongly coupled theory. Secondly, from the perspective of quantum gravity, we actually have now a theory of quantum gravity. Yes, it is a theory not in our space-time, ADS space-time, but it still has a lot of these space-times have a lot of similarities. And when there are questions which don't exactly relate to the nature of the boundary of the space-time, things like black hole information paradox, we can answer questions about it using ADS-CFT. So there has been tremendous progress in the last 30 years on ADS-CFT. For example, in 2019, we now have the first quantum gravity proper solution of the black hole information loss paradox from ADS-CFT. So from either from the quantum gravity point of view or from the gauge theory point of view, this has been a tremendous success, and everyone will agree.
So even though we haven't been able to fully solve quantum gravity, we've been able to find these correspondences, find these correlations between these two seemingly disparate worlds. Is that kind of the overall kind of headline of that?
Absolutely.
Super. And Nirmalya, maybe I'll stay with you before coming to Christian next. That one other thing that you mentioned sort of along the very same lines, and you had a lovely thread on this on Twitter, is this idea of double copy. So another thing that came along in this kind of string theory framework. What is double copy, and why did this get people excited as to string theory being the way forward as well?
Yeah, so this the idea of double copy, suppose you take a gauge theory, a real world gauge theory like gluons in quantum chromodynamics, QCD, and you calculate a scattering amplitude of these gluons, which is where you throw in particles and particles get out, and you calculate the probability of what is the probability of getting one particle out, which is the basic thing that everyone computes in quantum theory. Yeah. And then you start with a gauge theory, you start with, say, gluons, and you compute a scattering amplitude of gluons. And then this algorithm where you take that scattering amplitude, swap some numbers, get something, square them, all the inputs coming from the theory of gluons. And suddenly what you have is an amplitude in gravity, which is a completely unrelated theory. It doesn't make sense why this should be true, because you have on one hand gluons, and you do something with the gluon scattering amplitudes, and you get a gravity scattering amplitude. Yeah. This is an exceptional development, which was kind of formalized in 2008. But the idea of this goes back to string theory, where there is something called the KLT relations discovered way back in 1986. And there, it comes from the fact that in string theory, we can have open and closed strings. And if we have a closed string, and there also we calculate the scattering amplitudes, and you can think of if there's a closed string and there are vibrations moving along the string on left and right directions, they kind of factorize into two open strings. So basically, scattering amplitude in a closed string factorizes into scattering amplitudes of open strings. And then from string theory, you can take a limit where you go to field theory. You have all these vibrations of string theory, and then you take a certain limit where you get back the field theories. And that showed that gravity, and this correspondence between open and closed strings showed that gravity, and there's something to do with gravity scattering amplitude being the square of gauge theory scattering amplitudes. So that was where it all started. And then there were further developments, new things were developed, new ideas gotten before the current form of the double copy that we have now. But it would have never been discovered. I mean, no one would, in their right mind, think put something with gauge theories and suddenly try to get gravity out of it by squaring it, unless that idea came from string theory, which made it plausible, which was the origin of where this came from.
So again, over the last couple of decades, we found these unexpected links between these quantum field theories and the gravity theory. Is this something that touches, because this will be, a lot of people will say a lot of these are kind of mathematical advancements. Is this something that touches real physics? So you can do a real calculation in gravity, a real calculation in QFT?
Absolutely. Because right now we do these calculations in gravity, where the binary inspiral calculations, where you have stars, black holes rotating around each other. We see their gravitational waves. We calculate those waveforms, and this double copy relation is one of the things that is used to calculate those, because now it makes gravity amplitudes, which are much harder to calculate, much easier, because now you just have to square a gravity gauge theory amplitude. So it's actually used, and it has become like one of the methods which in some ways goes further than the other analytic methods available. So absolutely, this is a useful thing.
Amazing. Another one, Christian, to come back to you. You mentioned, and I think you mentioned it in the video you did with Dave as well, some breakthroughs in condensed matter physics, so superconductivity, and Hassaan mentioned it in plasma physics as well. So what are the kind of developments we've had on those sides?
Yeah, good. So this also connects to holography and ADS-CFT, which we were just discussing, and it comes back to this equivalence between two seemingly different theories: a gravitational theory and a quantum field theory that has no gravity whatsoever. So anytime that you have some quantum field theory that models some behavior that you're interested in, if you can cook up a similar toy example, a quantum field theory with some of the properties of the one of interest, which is dual to some gravitational system, then that buys you some mileage, because then you can use gravity tools in order to infer properties of the quantum field theory. So the example on the screen, which Sabine criticized somewhat indirectly in her video, is this notion of a holographic superconductor, which I think is very cool. This is another, to me, amazing connection between apparently unrelated things. So what these guys do in this paper is to say, well, there is this phenomenon which we know called superconductivity, where some materials, when you cool them down below a certain critical temperature, they have this remarkable property where the electrical resistance goes to zero. So a current will just persist indefinitely in these materials. And this phenomenon of superconductivity can be described by certain quantum field theories, like the so-called BCS theory. So you might naturally ask, well, can I find some gravitational system which is dual to a quantum field theory that shares some properties with the ones that model superconductivity? And that's essentially what these guys did in this paper. So they cooked up a gravitational system that has a black hole, where the black hole is now playing the role of the temperature of this material, the superconductor that you want to cool down. Black holes, as we learn, have something called a Hawking temperature, and they radiate. So there's a well-defined notion of temperature for a black hole. And what these guys do is use this black hole that's playing the role of temperature to cool down a gravity system, which corresponds to cooling down the dual field theory. And they see exactly this phenomenon where there's a so-called second order phase transition, that you hit some temperature, something called a charge scalar condenses in the gravity side. And this is the signal, the smoking gun, that there's a superconducting phase transition in the dual field theory. So it's a little bit like in a real superconductor, how you get these Cooper pairs, these things pair up, and you have superconductivity. So this, I think, it's really quite amazing. It's one of a series of examples where we're able to use gravity tools in order to get field theory insights, here for superconductivity, but also for other examples with strongly interacting field theories like the quark-gluon plasma, which you briefly alluded to before, and there's other examples.
Amazing. So, Hassaan, is this, all of these ideas, all of these links between gravity and quantum field theory, all of this progress in the mathematics, allowing us to use the mathematics of one to treat the other, are these the successes over the last several decades that make theoretical physicists remain excited by string theory? These are the ideas, this kind of incremental progress. Are these the ideas that are keeping people working on this framework?
I'm not sure. I think for different people, there may be different reasons for why they are working on string theory and keep working on string theory. I'm pretty sure that I know a lot of string theorists who don't know a lot about the progress in mathematics that string theory has done. Right. So you don't need to know these progresses in mathematics. I think one of the things that okay, if you ask me that, okay, if I had to take a poll among string theorists, that okay, what is the main reason that why that you keep working on string theory? I don't know
It's not
what
the money and the Ferraris and the mojitos and the things that
if you
about.
want to make money, go to Wall Street. Don't work on string theory, please. I mean, it's much easier. So the thing is that I don't know what the distribution would look like, but I would be very surprised if the most given answer is not this one. And the answer is string theory has some remarkable internal mathematical consistency. I mean, and people may say that, okay, it may seem to be the case that, yeah, there is some very naive mathematical consistency, and then we are crazy about it. I wish I could, convey it in words. String theory, this consistency is achieved in like very non-trivial ways. So people have tried to calculate something using one way, and then there's another way, and it didn't need to be that the same answer using the other way, but it turns out to be the case. I can give you some examples, but it will become technical. But the thing is that that's one of the main reasons why people are like hooked to string theory, because the thing is that these answers need there is no reason that these answers had to be the same. And the thing is that this internal consistency is achieved in so, I don't know how to describe it, to be honest. I mean, I will have to use maths, but it's achieved in so intricate ways that you are like, okay, come on, if this is not the correct theory of the world, I don't know how all of this is happening.
It's crazy that it would be like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And that
yes.
leads people on, along with the ability to do certain calculations which are more difficult in different frameworks. So I guess
one more thing.
Please. No, please.
I can say it publicly. If string theory has a mathematical inconsistency, I'll stop working on it. And I'm not the only one who is saying it. I think even Ashok Sen said it. So there is no good reason to work on string theory if it doesn't have mathematical consistency.
People are not just sat there saying, we're wedded to this, we've gone so far, we're just going to keep going, whatever, come hell or high water.
Yeah, exactly.
If something better comes along, then people will shift, as they did when the anomaly cancellation came on. This will be exactly what happens again. So the question becomes, as we kind of switch gears, Nirmalya, if I come to you, is Sabine aware? She should be, because she's obviously she's not a crank. She's a very intelligent person. She's knowledgeable in these fields. Is she aware of all these progresses, and does she downplay them? Because from what you've been putting on your Twitter, and I've also seen this from Christian as well in some of his beautiful note packs that he shared with me, she seems to be well aware of a lot of this fantastic progress over the last few decades. And either she's changed her mind very recently, or some of the presentations she seems to give in videos to the layperson are maybe a little bit, I hesitate to say disingenuous, but not necessarily in keeping with some of her older comments, shall we say.
Yeah, definitely there's a difference between how she used to present string theory earlier and how she presented, for example, in the geometric unity video. You can see in her book that, for example, she lists both the successes and the failures.
So this is from Lost in Math, right? This is from
Lost in Math, where she is saying that gauge gravity duality is the biggest breakthrough in foundational physics in the last decades. And she also said that string theory has not found evidence. So it gives a balanced picture. But now what she's claiming is that string theory has the same status of being a completely nonsensical theory like GU. So obviously there's a difference. I don't know why it's there, but it's very much.
I think some people would have some ideas why they're there. Maybe we'll come on to those later. Maybe I'll be a little bit harsher than some of you guys, but okay. Yes. So there's been a little bit of a change in tune here. So this is a few lines from Sabine's book, Lost in Math, where she says, research on string theory has also brought about the biggest breakthrough in foundational physics in the last decades, the gauge gravity duality. The implications of this duality are nothing but astonishing. And then suddenly, in the video that came out a couple of weeks ago, suddenly everything is trash, everything is terrible. People are allowed to change their minds, but this would seem to be quite a severe U-turn. So, given all of this background, I want to move on to the main contentions that Sabine makes during her video. And the video is called, kind of eye-rollingly, Physicists Are Afraid of Eric Weinstein, and they should be. Big sigh. Yes. Thank you, Christian. I mean, I thought we were all supposed to be, according to Eric Weinstein, at least scared of Ed Witten, but I guess there are different levels of terror in theoretical physics. So Sabine contends Eric Weinstein's geometric unity theory of everything is only as bad as other leading theoretical frameworks like string theory, and perhaps actually not as offensive because Eric doesn't use any public money. So some quotes, she says it's totally in line with all the other nonsense that physicists in the foundations of physics now work on. She says that Sean totally knows most of her colleagues work on similarly flaky stuff. It's just been covered up by more working hours. So this idea that geometric unity and string theory are on kind of equivalent levels. And secondly, that scientists are scared of Eric Weinstein because all he's really doing is exposing the rot in theoretical physics, presumably by creating more serious rot himself. Anyway, so we should note at this stage that numerous physicists and mathematicians, including Christian, Tim Wynne, Joseph Conlon, and others have pointed out the glaring mathematical errors and missing content in geometric unity. And these serious issues have not been appropriately acknowledged or addressed. So I think we can proceed under the extremely solid assumption that they're well grounded. Nevertheless, Christian, could you give us maybe a quick 30-second a minute assessment of the kind of current status and soundness of geometric unity to support us kind of proceeding under that assumption?
Sure, I'll do my best. Although
I know that's a bit of a tall order.
Yes, I had the unfortunate experience of reading the paper and trying to summarize it. But
everyone's reaction, knowledgeable person's reaction to reading that paper, seems to be the same. That it was a little bit of a chore, a little bit of a thankless task. So that maybe tells us something straight away.
Yes, it's a bit agonizing. So there's many pieces to the paper. Some of them are purely mathematical and are essentially wrong. But if we sort of try to remove those and just big picture what he's trying to do. So he advertises geometric unity as a framework for constructing a theory of everything, which taken at face value means that he would like to unify gravity and the other fundamental forces and presumably also combine them with quantum mechanics. That's what he claims to do. And he tries to do this by sort of separating gravity from the other forces by having them live in different spaces. So there's the four-dimensional space-time that we live in, 3 space and 1 time. And then he constructs this sort of auxiliary space, which he calls the observerse, by thinking about something called the metric tensor that lives at each point of space-time. The metric tensor has 10 independent components for reasons which I can explain. So then he constructs this other space, which has 10 plus 4, 14 dimensions, 10 from the metric and 4 from the 4 dimensions of space-time, and then works in this 14-dimensional space. And after going upstairs to this 14-dimensional space, he then tries to define a gauge theory, which we mentioned before. So he constructs this strange augmented torsion and all of these weird ingredients that are not at all standard in physics, despite what Sabine says when she claims that the mathematics is pretty close to what we're doing. It's not even close.
We've got the curly circle and all these kind of crazy things that are not well defined. But anyway, please keep going.
Yes, the Shiab operator, the circle. He introduces all of these ingredients. It's sort of a kitchen sink of things where he throws in all sorts of random stuff. Many of them are either undefined or wrong. And then his main contention, his main assertion is, look, if you take this 14-dimensional gauge theory, which I have defined, then in a way which he never really makes precise, he claims that that 14-dimensional gauge theory somehow gives rise in the 4 dimensions that we see to a theory that has the standard model plus additional stuff. That's the main claim. But there are many, many issues with this claim. So I wouldn't take it very seriously, to put it mildly.
We're going to jump into some of these things that separate out string theory from geometric unity. Just before we do that, Hassaan, I want to let you jump in here because you seem to know ahead of time, and I want to know how, that this was going to be Sabine's defense. So you put this out, I think, maybe the week after, the Sean Carroll, Eric Weinstein debate. And then Sabine came along sort of only last week. So I guess kind of a month, maybe 6 weeks after the Sean Carroll debate and ran exactly this defense that, geometric unity might be broken. It might be nonsense, as Christian has nicely elucidated. But really, It's only as bad as string theory. How did you know she was going to do this?
I mean,
Hassaan?
because
did Ed Whitten tell you what? Are
No.
you psychic? What's going on?
I would be surprised if Witten even saw Weinstein versus Carroll. I mean, he has much better things to do. The thing is that it's not hard to predict Sabine's behavior. I think I've seen a lot of academics who are very charitable to Sabine. I don't think she deserves it. The thing is that Sabine, okay, here's the thing. I'm going to give her her credit. Sabine is a physicist. Yeah. She used to be a serious physicist, right? She's not a crackpot that used to be a crackpot from very start.
She knows.
Yes, I agree. The thing is that Sabine knows what she's doing. Sabine, if you go to Sabine,
this is the thing that makes it bad that people need to
exactly. Yeah. The thing is that if you go to Sabine's YouTube channel, right, and if you look at the number of views on different videos, so the thing is that she still does popular science, and the thing is that what she has done for popular science in the past, that's commendable.
Yeah. And she can do a good job doing popular science. She knows the stuff.
Course,
she can present it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So the thing is that if you look at her, the number of views on her videos that are popular science videos and the number of views on the videos that are anti-academia videos, they're like orders of magnitude difference. Yeah. And she knows that what gets her views. Yeah. The thing is that, okay, I hope that my visa is not revoked for saying this. We are living in a time that is very anti-intellectual and anti-academia. And there is a big audience out there. If you talk about, problems in academia, even if they're lies, people don't care about truth in this world. And she knows that this audience is something that she can monetize, right? And she's doing it. The thing is that she knows what she's doing. If she, okay, here's the thing. If she only stuck to the thing that, okay, string theory is wrong, it's fine. I mean, I disagree with her, but it's fine.
Yeah, but people in the field have this and tolerate is not the right word, but people are like, fine, that's your opinion, that's okay. Like,
yeah, that's fine.
That's fine, no problem.
Sabine is not the first person to say it. I mean, I miss the time when string theorists, bitter critics used to be Lee Smolin and Peter White. I mean, they were much more respectable. They never said that they are doing it for grant money and lying for grant money. That's like a very, very dangerous lie to spew, because that, we saw what happened when COVID was, here. I mean, people didn't believe on doctors. People didn't believe on, scientists at all. And this is something that she is accelerating. I mean, if you tell people that scientists lie for grant money, I mean, do you know how much grant money is? I mean, if you really want to make money, go to Wall Street. I mean, grant money.
This is what I said. Like, if you look at her, Social Blade, her the amount of money she must be getting from YouTube ad revenue and Brilliant sponsoring the videos and whatever, it's pretty galling to have a friend of mine who's, getting 20,000, 30,000 a year working some PhD or a postdoc, being told, I really think you're kind of pushing this collider because you're going to really make some money out of it. It's like, really?
No, it's not.
Are you serious? Are you serious?
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, I do remember that when I did this podcast with Zohar Komargotsky, we discussed this thing, and he said that he knew Polchinski. Polchinski is a big name in string theory, and other people. When they were in their offices, they used to think about solving problems. They didn't think about how to get more money from grants. I mean, that never came up in their discussions, right? He said that. And the thing is that one of the tactics that she does is becoming very, very, common. So the tactic is this: come up with a theory. It doesn't matter if it is correct or not. It just needs to be, filled with jargon so that public will think that it's correct, right? And then go to public. You don't need to go to scientific journals. You don't need to go through peer review. Right. And this is not something that Sabine and Eric Weinstein, Sabine doesn't do it, but Eric Weinstein does. I mean, Avi Loebi is doing it. Who is a serious, respected astronomer, but he is playing this game because now he just wants to sell his books. I mean, Professor Dave has made a video on him as well, but even if he didn't made one, I mean, that's true for, even before his video. So the thing is that this is like a tactic that people know that, okay, now this is something that I can use to make money. If if your aim is to make money, this is it's like a proven thing that it will work for you. I don't think that Sabine deserves to be, respected anymore. I mean, I don't respect her at all now. She is defending a person, Eric Weinstein, who is against peer review, right? And who says that people need to be civil with him, but then he does Witten's voice on Joe Rogan. I mean, what the hell? I mean, is this civil? I mean, are you like mimicking Witten's voice on Joe Rogan, and then you say that people are not civil with you? You don't need to be taken seriously. And
so I guess the bottom line of this is it didn't take you much to get to this because it's what she does every single time, right? It's amazing that it actually took her a month to come up with this way to walk the line between, okay, his idea is garbage, I have to kind of say that to keep some credibility, but I don't want to go too hard because then I'm going to alienate Eric. I'm going to alienate his audience. So it's a kind of fine line to walk, right? So you end up with,
exactly,
well, he's bad, but is it really his fault? Because everyone's kind of the same, aren't they?
Exactly. I mean, there are two more things. One thing, I think I forgot one thing. It was about Eric. So nobody is scared of Eric Weinstein. I mean, come on. I can understand if Eric says that people are afraid of Witten. They're afraid in the following sense.
Scary,
if you have
scary dude, yeah. He's
he's a very nice person. I mean, if you meet him, he's a very, very nice person. I mean, the thing is that when you have some intellectual integrity, you are afraid that you don't want to say something wrong in front of senior people. That's the only afraid.
Which is why Nirmalya threw the question to you when, like, he thought you could answer it better, right? This is what we do.
He's more senior than me. He can do. I mean, he's just being modest. He can answer it too, of course. The thing is that that's one thing. I mean, Eric Weinstein follows me on Twitter for some reason. I don't follow him. I don't care. I mean, why would I be scared of him? I mean, there is no reason to be scared of Eric Weinstein. And the second thing that I wanted to say is that Eric Weinstein knows that people will, expose his lies. So this is something that we discovered, but we have never, discussed it, in video. So Eric Weinstein's PhD thesis was available for free on ProQuest, right? After Sean's debate, that thesis is not available. You have to pay for it. What happened? I mean, he knows that if people see his PhD thesis, they are gonna, deduce that, he's lying about Witten stealing his equations. It was not his equation, by the way. But if you are so transparent, make that thesis public. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he asked them to, make this thesis, put this thesis behind a paywall. So I don't know why that happened only after that debate. I mean, that's the only explanation that I can come up with. So I don't think that he wants to have a good faith conversation about his. I mean, for example, that when Brian Keating, again, a person who I don't respect, but still, he at least asked Eric that, do you have any comments about, Tim Nguyen and Theopolia's criticism? And he just said that, who is Theopolia? I mean, it doesn't matter who is Theopolia. I mean, he doesn't want to address criticisms on his theory. So there is no reason to be, scared of Eric Weinstein. The only thing that I'm scared of is that what he will do to the public, because he can just brainwash public into thinking that academia is corrupt. That's
so the bottom line is that this was always going to happen because of the dynamics that are going on with these people. This is, you didn't have to come up with any sort of great, you didn't have to look into your crystal ball. It was always going to happen. So maybe if we go to the main contention then. So what do we make? And maybe if I come to you, Nirmalya, first, what do you make of this claim that string theory and geometric unity are essentially two sides of the same worthless coin? What are the key points that separate out geometric unity from string theory? Why are they not, two piles of excrement?
Yeah, Sam. So let me go back a little and talk about what kind of makes me, believe in string theory, and that kind of will answer your question. Yeah. And I started out not in string theory. I did my PhD in loop quantum gravity, and it was only later that I kind of joined the big tent of string theory. And why was that?
Converted, yeah.
So why was that? And the reason is this non-empirical successes of string theory. And what do we mean by non-empirical success? We obviously don't have empirical proof of string theory, but there are a lot of non-empirical successes, like we talked about. And what is the general idea of a non-empirical success? For example, let me give an example. Suppose I have never been to Australia, but I believe Australia exists. Some people don't, but I do. And although I haven't actually checked the data on whether it exists, I haven't checked empirically if it exists, but I believe it because it's consistent with a lot of things that people have told me. I've met people who are claiming to be from Australia. I've seen tickets to Australia.
You've seen a kangaroo?
I've seen a kangaroo on TV. and it could be that everyone is lying, or it could be that all these consistencies mean something. Yeah. And they mean that it strengthens my belief that Australia exists. Now, if I were to tell you that, I've been to this country of Australia, which is, I say, an excellent, beautiful, big country, and you're not going to ask me to show me on the map where Australia is. You're going to laugh at me because it's not consistent with anything you know. because it's just a made up thing. And you can tell immediately, even without empirical evidence, because it's completely an inconsistent story. Yeah. And GU right now is for Australia. So it doesn't, there's nothing there. Yeah. What string theory does is that it's mathematically consistent with itself. It's consistent.
Which geometric unity is not. So it's mathematically consistent. Geometric unity is not. So this is a point of distinction immediately. Like,
Immediately, yeah. So it's consistent. It's consistent with all other quantum theories, all the other theories of nature that we know. String theory gives the total, complete general relativity at the correct limit. It reproduces Einstein's equations. All of these are, non-empirical checks of a theory that
geometric unity does not pass any of those checks.
And then it comes to all the things that we discussed, like double copy, like gauge gravity duality, things about theories of nature like gravity, like gauge theories, which we are learning from string theory, which are being explained from string theory, which we didn't know before. Developments which have been guided by string theory. We didn't talk about several of them, and there are more, where there are things that we didn't know about the theories that we use, and we first learned because of string theory. So all of these non-empirical evidences add up, and which is why we believe, many of us believe that, string theory has to be true, or even if it is not the theory of nature, it certainly knows a lot about the way our theories operate, and we would like to find out why that is true. So it's definitely proven itself to be a useful venture, whereas GU has not.
So string theory is well defined, geometric unity is not. String theory has all of these consistency checks, geometric unity does not. You can derive general relativity from string theory. You can't from geometric unity, despite Eric's grand pronouncements. You can learn all of these amazing things and do all these calculations we've talked about earlier using string theory methods. You can't with geometric unity. There's so many differences, Christian, isn't there, that it's kind of bizarre to make them the same. It's like saying I've got two animals here. They're both mammals and therefore they're both dogs. Because they're the same on one level, neither of them has solved quantum gravity completely, then they're both the same. But that's just completely not correct.
Yes, I agree completely. And it's one, a false equivalence for all of the reasons that you just said. But two, I think that people can point to certain superficial similarities in order to make this case and say, well, they look like they're roughly the same. Because we mentioned before, geometric unity has extra dimensions. It lives in 14 dimensions for some bizarre reason that Eric wants to think about this bundle of metrics. And string theory also has a critical dimension where it likes to live. The superstring likes to live in 10 dimensions.
So this is roughly what Eric's working on, I believe. It's all fairly unremarkable, really. The mathematics is pretty close to what physicists are using already, and it's totally in line with all the other nonsense that physicists in the foundations now work on.
So I just want to emphasize for anyone who might see these superficial similarities and think, oh, is there some sort of equivalence because both of them seem to have similar ingredients? They're completely different. They're not anywhere near the same footing for all of the reasons that we just said. Geometric unity is inconsistent. It's not well defined in any reasonable way. And if you read the paper, it seems like there's even some intentional attempts to obfuscate the fact that it's not well defined. So it's a sort of dishonest smoke and mirrors sort of thing, where I think Eric is trying to hide the fact that there are very, very fatal flaws with this theory, whereas string theorists are much more honest. I think if there were, as Hassaan was saying, if there were a mathematical inconsistency with string theory, one, we would stop working on it. And two, because of that fact, people are trying very, very hard to look for these sorts of things. People do highly non-trivial checks where if any one of them failed, it would completely kill the theory. So just the attitude of string theorists versus the attitude of Eric towards the theory are also completely different, setting aside any differences with the theories themselves.
And this goes into, I guess, the response to it as well. That when there is a shortcoming in string theory, the lack of contact with the physics at lower energies, for example, string theorists admit that, whereas Eric seems to call names and kind of hide. And I don't believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that he's responded to your critique, certainly hasn't responded to Tim Wynn's critique. Joseph Conlon's critique. This is how scientists respond. They recognize the boundaries of, what string theory can do and where the problems are, and then they work on it, right? Rather than just kind of obfuscating and hiding away.
Yes, that's right. I looked very carefully to see if there were any public discussion where Eric responded to any of these criticisms. And the best I could find were some mischaracterizations of what was written in Tim and Theo's paper. So for instance, Tim and Theo correctly point out that if you attempt to define this undefined Shiab operator in Eric's paper by something called complexification, then you have something called a gauge anomaly, which we discussed before, and that's fatal for the theory. The mechanism by which that arises is there is a chiral anomaly, which becomes a gauge anomaly. And in one of the public conversations, Eric mischaracterized this observation by saying, Tim and Theo incorrectly believe that my theory is chiral. But these are different things. A chiral theory versus having a chiral anomaly, which becomes a gauge anomaly, are not the same thing. So at best, if he responded at all, besides just launching ad hominems, which he also did, at best his response is mischaracterizing the criticisms, which is either him not understanding enough of the physics to know why those criticisms were made in the first place, or intentionally misleading people who are just not aware of the technical details.
And neither of those is good, right? Like whichever one it is.
I have a question. I have a question
Please,
for Christian, because this is an interesting thing. So when he says that his theory is not chiral, does he also mean that you cannot get something like the standard model from his theory, because standard model is chiral, right?
Yes, that's right. So he has a song and dance in his paper, which you can read about, where he claims that the true theory of nature should be non-chiral, and this effective chirality sort of emerges in some indirect way. And then he has this bizarre statement that the fact that the true theory is non-chiral is in some way an explanation for some dark matter or dark energy. I'm forgetting now. It's really a word salad.
I think it's dark mirror particles, or there's like an extra word thrown in somewhere to kind of. Anyway, you're
to be very honest, people do work on something called left-right symmetric model. So probably he's working on something like that. Where left-right symmetric mean that you also have like right-handed particles in your theory, which are missing from standard model. But I don't know if he's saying something like that, or if he's saying that you can't get standard model. Because if that's what he's saying, his theory is already dead, right? You should be able to get standard model at low energies.
Yes, the theory is already dead for many, many other reasons, but one of his claims is you do get the standard model plus extra particles at low energies, although I don't believe this claim, to be clear.
And I think the last time I checked, at least from the 2013 lecture, sort of Joseph Conlon had said that some of these particles probably should have shown up at the LHC in the current sort of run of his, the current setup that Eric had, and they obviously haven't. So that would seem to also be experimental falsification of this idea, if any were needed. But I don't know if it's well defined enough to do any experimental tests. Christian, before we move on to the next question, one thing where Sabine also tries to make these kind of superficial looking connections between geometric unity and string theory is this idea that, geometric unity doesn't make much touch with, real physics, but, string theory doesn't do that either. So she throws out this, let me get it. She snidely kind of says, what Calabi-Yau manifold are we talking about again? What the hell's going on? String theorists don't really know what they're doing.
Well, Joel, why don't you talk for a little bit about all these supposed ADS-CFD predictions for condensed matter, this or that, which were supposed to revolutionize superconductivity? Whatever happened to that? And just exactly how is string theory defined anyway? Did they actually ever solve the problem of quantum gravity? Like, did they ever prove it's finite? What Calabi-Yau manifold are we talking about again? Or how about loop quantum gravity? Do they have a well-defined Hamiltonian? Where is the classical limit?
What is she getting at here? I guess she's getting at this idea that string theory doesn't quite touch particle physics or cosmology enough.
That's right. That's the claim. So this is something that a very active community, the string phenomenology community, as it's called, works on, or string pheno. Let me first just emphasize that this is not what all string theorists are doing. So there's many other active areas of research within string theory, but string pheno specifically is trying to make contact with observed physics like the standard model, realistic cosmology. Oh, there's a beautiful picture from String Pheno 2023 on the screen. And one of the key steps that you need to do in string phenomenology, if you're going to start with the superstring, which lives in 10 dimensions, is to compactify, which we mentioned briefly before. So you try to curl up 6 of the extra dimensions that we don't observe using some tiny internal space, leaving the 4 dimensions that we see. And different choices for that internal space lead to different physics in the remaining dimensions. So a popular choice to use for this compactification is something called a Calabi-Yau manifold. And her criticism seems to be, well, there are many, many Calabi-Yau manifolds. There are many choices of different ways to do this compactification. And we don't really know which of those choices gives rise to the physics that we see. That's her criticism. But I think she's ignoring. Oh, great! You have the review on the screen as well. She's ignoring.
I might have stolen a couple of your points from the PDF. Not many, but I thought you might want to see this one.
Yes, great. I highly recommend people take a look at this if you want to know just a summary of what we learned. So I think Sabine has kind of criticized this paper already in one of her videos, which I also found very disingenuous. But the long and short of it is this very nice paper summarizes some of the progress in string phenomenology, and specifically the question of, can you make contact with the observed particle physics that we see, like the standard model, using string theory compactifications? And the short summary is that almost all of the ingredients that you would want for the standard model either have been engineered in string theory or seem to be very close to being engineered in string theory. The remaining challenge is really to get all of them at the same time. So to combine a string compactification that gets the standard model with a realistic cosmology and solving some problems like moduli stabilization. So the point is that this is not something where we know nothing. Sabine seems to be characterizing this by saying, well, there's this huge landscape of compactifications and we just have no clue what's going on. String theorists have not figured out anything. And this is a misrepresentation. There's been an enormous amount of progress, and we've learned a lot, and you can read about some of it in this very nice review.
It seems to be that same problem again, Christian, that wasn't string theory supposed to solve quantum gravity? If you haven't solved all of quantum gravity, well, Eric's hasn't solved all of quantum gravity, and therefore they're completely the same. It's just such a ludicrous standard. I could turn around and say, I have this flying spaghetti monster idea, and that also doesn't solve quantum gravity, and therefore it's the same as string theory. It's just such a silly thing to say. To make
my neighbor hasn't solved quantum gravity. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So he's Ed Witten. My neighbor hasn't solved. Exactly. So my neighbor hasn't solved quantum gravity. My neighbor is therefore Ed Witten. No, she's an old lady, but no, she's actually Ed Witten. It's just such a stupid comparison that when you put it in those terms, like, people watching have to see how silly it is. Just because two things don't, solve all of physics doesn't mean that they're equally worthy of praise, equally consistent, providing equal progress in the field. There's so many different metrics which make them different. It's just absolutely mad. It really winds me up.
So what Christian said, that that string theorists know that what things need to be done in order to connect string theory to the real world. I would argue that it may seem a bit random that what string theorists are doing. I mean, they seem like just jargon words and random. I would argue that everything that string theorists do, I mean, the main problems that are there in string phenomenology and string compactifications, they're all physically motivated. It's motivated by real world physics. So for example, somebody may say that, okay, why do you use Calabi-Yau manifold? If you want to have chiral theories, which standard model is, you need to have n equals 1 supersymmetry or no supersymmetry, right? If you need to have n equals 1 supersymmetry, it turns out that if you need to have Calabi-Yau manifolds, I mean, for certain string theories like heterotic string theory, for example.
So there are consistency reasons for choosing this, rather than just going, I'm just going to grab something out of the air that works. It's not.
And the thing is that there are other problems that string theorists work on. For example, there is something called moduli stabilization. That's like a big problem that string theorists work on. Why? What does that mean, and why do they care about it? Moduli stabilization means that you have these extra particles when you compactify dimensions, and you want these particles to be massive. Why? Because these extra particles, if they are massless, they will, introduce long-range forces that we don't see. So you see that all of this is physically motivated. There is another thing that string theorists work on called scale separation, right? What does scale separation mean? It means that the bigger dimensions, the larger dimensions, are actually large as compared to smaller dimensions. So you see all of this is physically motivated. It's not just random maths jargon that string theorists are, coming up with. So all of these problems are physically motivated. So Calabi manifold is physically motivated, moduli stabilization, scale separation, all of these things are physically motivated.
Absolutely. So Nirmalya, I'm going to come to you. Why do you believe, and maybe this is a little bit more sociology than science, why is Sabine pushing these ideas that, string theorists don't know anything, string theorists are just, getting the money and kind of spinning their wheels and not making any progress, when she's much more, shall we say, friendly towards people like Avi Loeb, who seem to be people who are taking a little bit of money while, pushing their book and not really making much progress.
I can't believe the fucking hypocrisy of these people.
What do you think is the motivation behind this? Because on one level, I would have a little bit of respect for someone who said, look, Eric's my friend, we work together a lot. I don't really want to make a video about him. I don't really want to get into it. It's going to make things awkward. I could have a modicum of respect for that, right? But when someone dives in and has such a double standard about scientists, particularly when it's Avi Loeb, who's pushing something that's against what most people are saying, Eric Weinstein, which is against the mainstream of what most people are saying, I kind of get to the situation where I kind of find this to be a little bit cynical. What's your take, Nirmalya?
I honestly don't know why she's doing it, although I have to say that I noticed there's certain double standards here.
Yeah.
That when she's talking about Eric Weinstein or Avi Loeb's videos, compared to when she is just, I saw one video where she picks up a random string theory paper and just lays into it. It's not even a paper that was like publicized in the media or anything. Yeah. It was a paper that probably had some idea of a dynamic string tension or something. And she just says, I don't believe nature works this way, and lays into the paper. No real context to it. So yeah, I noticed there is clear double standards in the presentation,
and she will go very far with this, right, Nirmalya? Because you sort of flagged this up on Twitter, that she'll go as far as to say quantum physics isn't fundamental to avoid having to criticize Eric Weinstein, right? Maybe that is the case in the end, but it doesn't mean that you can just say whatever you like at any stage. Anything goes. She really will go to quite severe lengths to avoid criticizing certain characters.
Yeah. So clearly, she was saying here that quantum theory maybe is not fundamental, just because Eric Weinstein's theory could have anomalies. So that was funny. And yeah, I don't know why, but the downstream effect of whatever the reason, the effect is the same, which is that the public is getting misinformed, and it strokes the anti-science agenda. Yeah. It kind of makes it easier for any political people who want to cut funding to science to have this set of justifications, which have been kind of handed over to them by these kind of arguments, which constantly push the agenda that scientists are, instead of being honest actors, they're just trying to scam you.
But normally, no one's saying anything about it because they're all tied up in the same scam. Unless the person who comes up with the idea is Eric Weinstein, in which case it's suddenly hugely offensive and everyone starts yelling.
And this is the really frustrating thing, isn't it? And Hassaan said it really nicely before, you've just said it really nicely again, is that this stuff is not without consequences. When you look at audiences, people are, I don't want to pay for this. I don't think they should be doing this. I think they're all scammers. This is handing arguments over for defunding science, right? And when you watch some of Sabine's videos, she will actually revel in this and say things like, look, some of these funding cuts could be good because it will force refocusing. And where does the refocusing go? on the things that I'm interested in. So these things are not disconnected and they're not without consequence in the real world. And I just find it very, very jarring that someone who's claiming to be the only honest broker and someone who calls spades spades is so unwilling to criticize Eric Weinstein, but is so happy to just lay in to physicists. Christian, it sounded, you looked exercised. It looked like you wanted to say something. Did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I think one other comment about this, just you asked about her motivation, and I think we've already alluded to it before, but I think the most obvious explanation is just money, in the sense that this sort of rhetoric and this sort of video attracts a larger audience. And one thing which you might already be aware of is that Sabine has 2 blog posts from years ago where she says, well, I needed some extra money to feed my kids, and I was trying to think of a way in order to use my knowledge about quantum gravity. So she started what she described as a crackpot consultant business. So she advertised to people who had their own pet theory of everything, like these crackpots or cranks that we spoke about. I can send you the links. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
So she advertised this and said, I will speak to any crackpot and I will charge them $50 for 20 minutes of my time in order to discuss their pet theory.
Is this how she met Eric? Like, I don't know.
Might have been. It seems like she's doing the same thing now. So if she was
absolutely coining it off Eric. But yes, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please go on.
Yeah, but if she was willing to do that at that point, I think her desire to engage with crackpots in order to make money has only grown since then. This seems like the natural progression of that sort of grifting.
Wow, that is very, very interesting. So yeah, I think we've gone over that to death. So we've got kind of 10 minutes to go. I like to finish. We've talked about a lot of the bad that's been said in this video. I think we've demolished basically the main thesis of this video. So as we come to the end, I wanted to chat a little bit about the future of theoretical physics in your minds, because obviously we'd like to solve all of physics in the most efficient manner going forwards. Hassaan, do you hold with this idea? This is what you hear from a lot of kind of contrarians on YouTube, that string theory has this kind of unfair dominance in theory departments. Is this the only kind of framework that people are working with? Are people being funneled into this? Is there a lack of money for other things? What is your thoughts on this idea that string theory kind of hoovers up all the talent and it's not allowing for enough diversity of thought in theory departments?
So I'll give you an example. It's not a totally fair example, but it kind of captures what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
If I say that, why do astronomy departments have people who think that Big Bang theory is correct and steady state model is not correct? What would be your? The thing is that because Big Bang theory model is correct, actually, that's why steady state model fails. And I mean, you can say that, okay, Big Bang model has experimental confirmation. I agree. That's why I said that it's not a totally fair example. But string theory and other alternatives to string theory have kind of the same thing. Yes, it's true that string theory is not experimentally confirmed, but smart people do physics. I mean, the thing is that you need to have a particular level of hardworking and being smart to do physics. With smart people are the thing is that they are presented with alternatives. A lot of them go to string theory. I'm not saying that all of them go to string theory. And I'm not saying that if you don't do string theory, you're not smart. That's simply not true. But when people are, nobody's forcing them. That's what I'm trying to say. People are independent to pursue whatever research they want to do. And if a lot of people are going into string theory and nobody's forcing them, it does say something that a lot of people are convinced by string theory.
This is what Cliff Burgess said in a previous video I did kind of on these ideas. He said it's a marketplace of ideas and string theorists are winning, and it's as simple as that.
And it's not a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy that other fields are held back. And the thing is that it's not that, for example, if there was a loop quantum gravity physicist in my department, I would be thrilled actually, because there is another person who I can talk to. I won't agree with that person, sure, but I would like that to happen. But the thing is that if people are not going into other fields, I mean, they are going, but not in as big numbers as in string theory, it means that people are convinced. Nobody's forcing. I mean, for example, if I want to go into loop quantum gravity research today, nobody will refrain me from going there. I mean, you have this example of Nirmalya, who used to work on loop quantum gravity. He came to string theory because he was convinced. Nobody forced. I mean, did someone
they convince
force
you, Nirmalya? Did Ed and Juan come round in the car and have a little word? What was, why did you switch? Yeah. Are they behind you now? I notice you've blurred out the background. Did they come in?
Yeah, they're right behind.
Yeah. So I think the dominance is there. I mean, if somebody says that there is no dominance, it's not correct. I mean, there is a dominance of string theory in departments. And by that, I mean that there are more people in string theory as compared to its alternative. It's not that physics departments are filled with string theories. That's simply not true. I mean, in my department, there are only 2 people who do string theory. That's it. So, but the dominance is there because more people are convinced by string theory. I mean, for example, if people on who are working on other alternatives, they come up with a solution of quantum gravity, I can bet that all string theorists will go to do quantum gravity. I mean, there is no reason for, keep working what you were working on if there are better alternatives to work on.
And this goes back to what you were saying before, right? The kind of origins of string theory. Like, before it had these successes, before it jumped through these hoops, people were looking at it and going, why are you working on that? It's a tiny, uninteresting field until it shows the promise, until it passes through these hoops, right?
Yeah, there's one more thing that I would say. I don't know a lot of people if they know it. I mean, so Ed Witten was not doing string theory until 1982, right? In 1982, he read this review by John Schwartz, and he wrote this one paper by Alvarez Gomez. But he was not a string theorist before.
He was too busy stealing equations from Eric Weinstein.
No,
right?
At that time, Weinstein was not even a PhD student, by the way. So I'm talking about early 80s. So the thing is that he actually became a string theorist. He started to work on string theory after the first superstring revolution came, when this anomaly cancellation thing happened, and people were convinced that, okay, this is something worthy to work on. Before that, even Witten was, he was working on supersymmetry and things like that. He was not a string theorist, right? So, but even even for Witten, it took first superstring revolution to make him a full-time string theorist. So, the convincing matters. I mean, if you have an idea that is convincing, nobody can stop people from working on it. And it doesn't matter how much money you spend.
Well, okay, that's what I was going to say. So if you wanted more diversity, is this just a case of throwing more money at it? It seems to be like you just say, no, people would still kind of, vote with their feet and go to the things that they were more convinced by, right? So people are kind of self-sorting. They're not being forced into one thing or another.
No.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is that if you really want to make money, you should not be in academia in the first place. But if you are in academia, you would work on. I mean, the thing is that there is no point in being in academia if you're not working on that you like to work on and that you are convinced by. There is no other point in being in academia. I mean, why would you take a very low salary to work on something that you don't even like? I mean,
for anyone who listen, I worked in experimental particle physics. I'm sure it's even worse in theory that you don't go in there for the money, like the long hours. Overworked, supervisor bugging you on a Saturday because they want some plots for the Monday morning meeting, expected to be in at certain hours and blah, 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 blah. Like, this is a tough job and you have to enjoy it. And I would argue, and I'm sure you would all agree, maybe you wouldn't, please say if you don't, but I would say you really don't get paid commensurate with the years of study and the technical expertise that you have. You could get much more money if you go work in a startup or an AI company or whatever it might be. So if you really want money, there are much easier ways to get it than, wrangling
just like Eric Weinstein, right?
Well, quite. Very, very
Exactly.
nice switch. Good. So final question, because I don't want to keep you for overly long. What would you say, Nirmalya, what are the major pushes we now need to do in string theory? What are the biggest open problems? Is this getting more contact with the low energy physics? Is this more string phenomenology? Is that where we need to put our focus? What are the big open problems, and where do you think we need to focus to get these solved?
Well, on all fronts, really. I mean, there are so many different fronts in string theory, like string phenomenology, which is trying to make connections with experiments, which Christian also spoke about. And absolutely, I think it's slightly underrepresented in string theory that not maybe enough people in string theory are doing string pheno. And I think definitely more people, there should be a lot of emphasis on that to try to, get the real world out there. Yeah. And there has been a lot of progress with the transplant programs and everything. And holography is still extremely promising. We're still learning a lot about, which is kind of what my thing, which is we're learning a lot about black holes and what goes inside black holes and how information comes out and so on. These give us, a lot of areas where to. So there's holography, there's string theory proper, there's the swampland program, all of these areas. So to kind of summarize, it would be like push on the empirical test as well as more non-empirical consistency conditions to develop, and that's how we will get to get closer to the true string theory.
Christian, any closing comments on that before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I agree, but maybe just to make one comment about sort of what string theory has become, because I think one thing that maybe a lot of lay people might not realize is that string theory is becoming a sufficiently mature field that it's branching off into many subfields, and it's getting almost difficult to delineate what is string theory and just what is string theory inspired. So if you go to you can Google string theory conferences, and there's a wiki, there's a list of all the string theory conferences. And it's a fun exercise to go through and look at these conferences and the talks in them and try to ask, is this really string theory? Is it string theory inspired? Where is the dividing line? It's a little bit like Newton and Leibniz inventing calculus, and then calculus branching off into analysis and differential geometry. And there's all of these related fields which aren't exactly calculus, but trace their intellectual roots back to calculus. So I'll just mention two of these that I think are exciting. So there's this area of generalized global symmetries, which has been very exciting recently. This was initiated by Nadi Seiberg and collaborators. Nadi is clearly a string theorist. A lot of the motivation and applications of this field are to string theory, but they're also applied to other areas that are not string theory related, like condensed matter, to phenomenology, and so forth. So I consider this in my head sort of part of string theory in the sense that it's discussed at string conferences. It recently got a big Simons grant, which, to Sabine's point, is private money. So this is not taxpayer money going into this. It's private money, so you don't have to worry about it. But I think it's very exciting, and it's something people should work on more. And another example like this is something called celestial holography. This was initiated by Andrew Strominger, who is for sure a string theorist. He did Strominger-Vafa, which is a famous string theory black hole microstate counting result. But a lot of the results in celestial holography, which are trying to extend ADS-CFT, which we discussed before and which works in anti-de Sitter space, it's trying to extend this to flat space, which is more similar approximately to our universe. And you could ask, is celestial holography part of string theory? Is it not? There are some people who are doing so-called top-down approaches to celestial holography, which do use string theory. There are people who are using so-called bottom-up approaches that don't use string theory directly, but holography itself is inspired by string theory. So we can debate about whether this is string theory or not, but it's an exciting direction. It's something a lot of people are working on. It was also funded by Simons, which is private money, so it's not eating up your taxpayer dollars. And I think it's something that people should be excited about. So I think this goes to both what are the interesting directions in string theory broadly defined, and it also goes to the diversity of ideas. There is not a monopoly if everyone is doing hardcore old school string theory. There's all of these new exciting ideas, and there's an enormous amount of diversity in the field.
Fantastic. Hassaan, any closing remarks, and then we will close up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I'm quite happy that Christian mentioned generalized symmetries, because that's like a big area that a lot of people are working on. And the thing is that this may seem that, okay, it's like some exotic thing. No, generalized symmetries has even applications for the standard model. So it's not that it only has, applications in string theory. No, that's simply not true. There are some very nice papers that people have written that provided explanation for something that people didn't understand very well. For example, in pion decays. I mean, they understood it, but generalized symmetries give you a new handle on those kind of things. Okay, anyway, one thing that I wanted to mention, and I didn't get a chance to mention it, so is the following. So there is this phrase, sentence that some people say that a lot of people find it to be arrogant, and I understand why they find it to be arrogant. The sentence is, string theory is the only game in town. Okay, I understand why people find it to be arrogant, but I think that this phrase, this sentence will have a lot of evidence behind it in the future, because there is this program called string universality. If this program is achieved, you can definitely say that string theory is the only game in town. So what is string universality? String universality says that any effective field theory, which is a low energy theory that you can get, which is consistent with gravity, every effective field theory comes from a string theory. Now, the thing is that this has been proven in 10 dimensions. This has been proven in 9 dimensions. This has been proven in 8 dimensions. And people are working on proving it in 7, 6, 5. Yes, exactly. I mean, those dimensions are easier actually, because in 10 dimensions, there is only one thing. It's completely fixed by supersymmetry. In 9 dimensions, you have to check 2 or 3 cases. In 8 dimensions, you have to check a lot of things. But in 7 dimensions or lower, people are still working on it. In 6 dimensions, there was this paper by Hector Paradifritis and Khan, I think, from Harvard. That's actually a very, very interesting paper, because they have this whole thing called a rank reduction map that they use to map out all the possibilities. But if this program is achieved until like 3 or 2 dimensions, you can definitely say that string theory is the only game in town. And after that, I won't accept if people say that why string theorist only in departments, because it needs to be that way. I mean, the thing is that you can show that every theory of quantum gravity has to be a string theory in disguise. But this program is not achieved yet. It may happen that it won't be achieved, but I don't see why not. So I hope that it is achieved in the future.
So lots and lots of exciting ways forward. Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time today. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to make sure all of your contacts, all of your links are down below. I'm going to point people to Christian's brilliant work with Professor Dave, talking about geometric unity, talking about some of the issues we've had today with a little bit more of a deep dive into the theory. I think you did as well, Christian, which I'll make sure those are linked below. Nirmalya, your brilliant links and threads on Twitter. Hassaan, your fantastic podcast, Phi Maths, isn't it?
Yes.
All of these will be down in the description. Gentlemen, thank you so much again. I really, really appreciate it. I think people will really enjoy hearing your thoughts. And, next time there's another crazy comparison on the interwebs, I'm sure we can get back together and discuss it again. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
It's great. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care, guys. Take care. I want to know what you think, because you're the scholars of enlightenment that I do this for. So please take a moment, if you wish, to let me know down in the comments section. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, setting up notifications, and sharing this video more widely. I can't tell you how much these simple actions help me out and how much I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being scientific. Thanks for being bad.